Thank you for that wonderful music introduction, and welcome everybody to this very special occasion where we have gathered to recognize and thank Betty Anne Younker for her wonderful job as Dean over the last decade now of the Faculty of Music, the Don Wright Faculty of Music. My name is Sarah Prichard, and I'm the Acting Provost at Western, and it is my pleasure to be your host this afternoon. Before we get started, I just want to make a few housekeeping announcements. First of all, please keep your mics on mute. The best way to see all the speakers is to use the speaker view, which can be adjusted in the top right-hand corner of your screen. There is a recording of the celebration that will take place, and we ask that guests are able to invite you to leave a congratulatory message in the chat that will be included in a book that will be commemorating Betty Ann's time at Western. Let me start by saying a few words of my own. I've only known Betty Anne for a couple of years, but I knew from the moment I met her that I liked her. I liked her leadership style. I liked her personal style. She's a warm, intelligent, empathetic, and strong leader. Western was fortunate to be able to extract Betty Anne away from the University of Michigan in 2011. She had, of course, prior to that, she'd had stints at the University of Prince Edward Island, where she also did her undergraduate degree, as well as a short previous stint at Western. But we were fortunate that she chose to come back to Western. And as they say, the rest is history. And the history of the last decade has certainly been a very decorated one, a very important time for the Faculty of Music, and in particular and outstandingly, the ability of her leadership to put together the planning of and the execution of the new building so that the Don Wright Faculty of Music could be in the wonderful new home that it's in today. I personally want to thank Betty for not only what she's done for the Faculty of Music, but indeed for the whole university. I can tell you that a couple of days ago, we had a most entertaining, but also meaningful meeting of the deans who came together to say their thanks and to acknowledge Betty Ann's contribution. And in between the humor, they tried to sing, but they put together words from other songs. And although they need Betty Anne to give them a bit of voice training, the sentiments and the thoughts that were expressed by the deans, I think really spoke volumes to the contribution that Betty Anne has made to the broader university. Betty Anne, you are well respected by your students, by your staff, by your faculty, and by the senior administration. And we are deeply grateful for everything that you have brought to Western and to the Don Wright Faculty of Music. So a great big thank you. I now want to introduce our first speaker, who will speak on behalf of the faculty and the staff. I introduce to you Professor Ted Berg. He is a professor of voice and coordinator of the operatic studies at Western University. He continues to have enjoy a very interesting and accomplished career with the New York Philharmonic, the San Francisco Opera, the Canadian Opera Company, amongst others. He's performed in opera and in concerts on virtually every major stage in Canada, many in the United States. He's played more than 80 operatic roles, and he was heralded as Emile de Bec in the hit Stratford Festival production of South Pacific, one of my favorite musicals, actually. During the summer months, he's taught numerous young musicians in Italy, in Canada, and Brazil, and his students continue to be engaged in many of Canada's young artists organizations. So Ted has an extremely distinguished career, and it is very appropriate that he has come forward to speak on behalf of the faculty and staff. I'll hand it over to you, Ted.
Thank you very much. It's certainly my pleasure and my privilege. And in fact, I must honestly say it's my honor to say something about the tremendous accomplishments that Betty Anne has given us and has led us through in the Faculty of Music. Sarah mentioned a few of them, of the building and so on. I'm one, since I'm a performer, who lives very much in the present and what's happened fairly recently. Since the very beginning, though, I must say Betty Anne's leadership has been essential and so important to the growth and the pleasure to be where we are. Being a professor in a faculty where your leadership is one of you is really a wonderful, wonderful thing. But this past 18 months, it's almost 18 months now that we have endured such a change in the presence of COVID. We managed at the faculty to have an extraordinary experience where we still did so much of our work face-to-face, albeit with masks and barriers and so on. And the leadership provided by Betty Anne was absolutely nothing short of extraordinary on all levels. Betty Anne never asked us to do anything she wouldn't have done herself, that she did herself. Betty Anne was involved. Betty Anne was caring. I've had all kinds of interactions with Betty Anne as the head of the opera. And of course, we have to have lots of meetings because there's budget involved and so on. And she had never been anything but caring, kind, and empathetic to me, and also to the people I work with. This is so very, very important to people really wanting to be there and wanting to enjoy their work. And when someone is that kind of a leader, it makes such a difference to all of us. But this past 18 months has been really something. I felt so safe and so taken care of as a member of the faculty, and I know my colleagues did as well. All of us felt like we had a leader who was really there for us. And that's more unusual than one thinks. I've done operas and concerts and all over the world, and I have not met someone ever who's more caring and more understanding and more helpful than Betty Anne has been. And it's been a real pleasure. It's been an honor to work with her. And Betty Anne, I must honestly say, you will be profoundly missed for a long time. So, you know, no Kleenexes, all darn close, I must say. But really, it has been it's a matter of pride to have worked with you. And from the very beginning, we knew that we had a wonderful lady in charge of where we were, and that we were protected, and that we were well represented beyond our immediate borders at the Faculty of Music. So again, thank you from all of us, and we wish you nothing but the very best in your future. Thanks.
Thank you, Ted, for those warm words, and I certainly back up what you say about Betty's leadership during the COVID pandemic. It has been extraordinary, and certainly the Faculty of Music was faced with some of the greatest challenges in the whole university, and her leadership in this regard allowed students to continue to progress through their programs, and it was an outstanding success in a very, very difficult situation. It's now my pleasure to invite Amber Prue, who's the outgoing president of the Faculty of Music Students' Council. I've been fortunate to have met Amber over the last year, unfortunately, only by Zoom, but nonetheless, it seems to be how I've met a lot of people at Western. But I can speak to Amber as being an outstanding young student, a performer, a young woman, a leader. It's just been a pleasure to work with Amber. And Amber is going to have a few words to say on behalf of the students.
Hello, everyone. My name is Amber Prue, and I'm the outgoing president of the Faculty of Music Students' Council. And I had the wonderful opportunity to work closely with Dr. Younker this year to ensure the best possible student experience and to ensure student voices were heard. I am very grateful that I was able to work with a dean who kept the best interests of the students at the forefront of her mind. Dr. Younker patiently and thoughtfully answered my never-ending emails containing questions and concerns as I worked on behalf of students. Thanks to Dr. Younker, our concerns and opinions were not only heard, but a great effort was made to make change and to be helpful and accommodating. When speaking with Dr. Younker, I knew that our concerns were not only heard, but that she valued hearing what we had to say. Throughout my time working with Dr. Younker, it became very clear that she is hardworking and passionate, and I know full-heartedly that she is doing everything in her power to ensure we have the best student experience possible throughout this difficult time for our faculty. Thank you, Dr. Younker, for being such a dedicated and inspirational leader and for the care you take for each and every student. Your endless and enormous efforts are noticed, and the students are grateful for all you have accomplished in your time as Dean. We cannot thank you enough, and I wish you well as you take a moment to breathe, as you so deserve.
Thank you, Amber. And now we'll introduce a video from the New Horizons Band. Action, video. Wow. What a wonderful collection of beautiful faces and beautiful heartfelt messages. Thank you so much to the New Horizons Band. I now am going to invite Carol and Gwyn Bynon to say a few words on behalf of the donors and the alumni of the Don Wright Faculty of Music. And Encore, the concert band of which Betty Anne has been a participant. We say a few words about Carol and Gwyn. They're both graduates of the Faculty of Music. They're also both graduates of the Faculty of Education. Carol is a professor emerita in music education at Western and has served in several senior administrative roles over the years, including the Associate Vice Provost of the School of Graduate and Postdoctoral Studies and the Acting Dean of the Faculty of Education. She's the co-artistic director of the award-winning Amabile Boys and Men's Choirs of London, Ontario, Canada. She's the first author of a book, Learning to Teach, and co-editor of Critical Perspectives in Canadian Music Education. She's a specialist in vocal and choral development and serves as a clinician and adjudicator for national and international conferences and music festivals. In 2010, Carol was inducted into the Wall of Fame at the Don Wright Faculty of Music at Western. Gwyn, as I said, is also a graduate of Western. He was the class's gold medalist and served as a music educator and secondary school principal in the Thames Valley District School Board. He's played in the National Youth Orchestra of Canada, and currently plays trumpet in brass roots, I should say, and the London Jazz Orchestra. He's the artistic director of Encore, the concert band in which Betty Anne has played flute for the past 10 years. And Betty Anne, Carol, and Gwyn are happy to bring messages to you on behalf of our donors and alumni.
Betty Anne, Gwyn and I are truly honored to speak on behalf of some 6,000 music alumni and to recognize your significant contributions to music at Western, in our community, and around the world.
We have known Betty Anne as alumni and donors, and she and Dale have become valued friends over the past 10 years.
I first met Betty Anne about 20 years ago when she first came to Western Music as a new faculty member from UPEI. Ironically, both of us were shortlisted for this same faculty position in music education, and we were in direct competition. It was a wise decision to hire Betty Anne, as she brought her endless energy, passion, and innovative ideas, knowledge, and research in music education, not only to Music Western, but into the community as well. It was a short-term loss when she moved to the University of Michigan, but it was a long-term gain for Western as she developed critical leadership skills that have propelled this faculty into being a mainstream player in North America. At the time of hiring a new Dean of Music, I was serving as Dean in Education and part of the hiring process. Our Dean's group immediately recognized her strengths and saw that she possessed creative thoughts and boundless energy that made her the ideal candidate to become our new leader. Betty Anne faced challenges that she couldn't have foreseen, from managing a gigantic new build through significant budget cuts to growth in some areas and concerns for others. But with her indomitable spirit, she enthusiastically faced every challenge head on. As alumni and community members, we watched as Betty Anne connected immediately with alumni and the community in her new role. Through the last 10 years, she's attended hundreds of concerts locally and elsewhere, served as chair of the London Community Arts Program, and become a major donor herself, not only to Western, but to so many nonprofit musical groups. She is the true model of a servant leader.
It's not impossible to believe that she has somehow personally touched every one of the 6,000 alumni in one way or another. We've heard how she has made arrangements to visit alumni personally in every region of the province and country and around the world. If a meeting took her to the West Coast or the East Coast or even China, she connected with alums there and made arrangements to have coffee for no other reason than to keep in touch.
There's no doubt that Betty Anne is the consummate music educator and musician. She's never forgotten the importance of leading by example and motivation for everyone, for her faculty colleagues, for the community, no matter how young or old.
Shortly after arriving in London, she came out to one of our concerts, Encore the concert band, and I invited her to join the flute section. Her response was immediate and enthusiastic. Yes. In her words, I need to play for my own well-being. She has made time for Encore a priority in her own busy schedule and has been a faithful member and leader these many years. For example, through her friendship with Michael Haithcock, director of bands at the University of Michigan, Betty Anne convinced him to spend a weekend with Encore as guest conductor, and it was truly inspiring. If you haven't heard her play, she's a wonderful musician, and I have a short clip from a movement from Rosa, as in Parks, for you to hear.
Once we leave Western, we often have little interaction with our alma mater, but Betty Anne came here knowing that musicians, no matter how young or how long in the tooth, have a driving need to perform and to be involved. When she arrived, she canvassed the alumni and asked what she could do to support us. The resounding response was to perform. And indeed, she began an annual homecoming tradition that invited all alumni back to rehearse and perform in a band or choir conducted by our alumni using the brand new facilities. And there stood Betty Anne herself, shoulder to shoulder amidst all the performers. Hundreds of alumni have begun to return for this event and to become reacquainted with all that is wonderful about Western music. It comes as no surprise that Betty Anne was named to the mayor's list of honorees this past year for her commitment to the arts in London and our region.
Betty Anne is simply a hardworking, generous, and giving person who willingly shares all of her talents with others, an essential quality for leaders and deans, but more importantly, the most significant quality of being a good person. On behalf of all of the alumni in this community, we thank you for your service and wish you well in your next endeavors. And as Artistic Director of Encore, I look forward to seeing you back at rehearsals in person in the fall.
We certainly look forward to have Betty Anne back in person in the fall and beyond. Thank you for those wonderful words. It's now my pleasure and privilege to introduce to you the Betty Anne Younker Community Commons Project. As the first female dean for the Don Wright Faculty of Music, Betty Anne has seen many achievements during her decade-long tenure, including building and renovating the new music building and enhanced alumni and community outreach, as we've already heard from other speakers. To honor her legacy, faculty, staff, alumni, and friends and family came together to support the faculty and name a space in the music building, the Betty Anne Younker Community Commons. It has prominence and visibility to students, faculty, and staff, and the community in general in the music building lobby. More than 140 donors, names of whom you're now seeing on the slides, have supported the Betty Anne Initiative, which in turn supports the Don Wright Faculty of Music and initiatives within the music building, ensuring the faculty can continue to provide the best possible environment for our students to achieve their potential. There continues to need to be support for the space, and we invite you to continue to contribute. This past year, the Don Wright Faculty of Music was able to offer in-person classes, rehearsals, and recitals thanks to the leadership of Betty Anne and the team at Western Music. Our music students could still make music this past year. As I previously mentioned, it is my great pleasure to have been able to meet Betty Anne over the last couple of years, and a huge honor and pleasure to be able to introduce this space to you. And at this point, I would now like to call upon Jim Weiss, who will say a few things. But before that, let me say a few things about Jim. Jim teaches, consults, and conducts research and delivers speeches on the topic of leadership. His 5C leader concept and recent book have served as a foundation of his approach to leadership teaching. He served a number of senior leadership positions during his career at Western, including being Dean of the Faculty of Health Sciences, and he served as Vice Provost and had a stint as the head of Western International. Jim is always one of these people that Western knows can be called upon to help where help is needed and to lead in a way that is positive and constructive and brings great honor and value to the organization. So Jim, it's my pleasure to ask you to say a few words on behalf of the larger community.
Thank you very much, Sarah, and good afternoon, everyone. Let me begin my remarks by saying what an honor it is for me to participate in today's event, honoring the leadership and accomplishments of our dear friend and colleague, Dean Betty Anne Younker. As you've heard from others, Betty has overseen tremendous growth in the Don Wright Faculty of Music over the past 10 years. And I know Betty Anne would be the first to say it was a team effort. Betty Anne, you and your colleagues have every reason to be proud of your collective achievements. But like me, they would be quick to point out the undeniable fact that your leadership made a difference. Together, you significantly upgraded your facilities, championed curriculum development, built exciting synergies with sister faculties, and you skillfully and effectively raised the profile of the Faculty of Music on our campus and in the community. Betty Anne, you've done all this and more with that 100-watt smile of yours always beaming, by employing your engaging personality and lightening even the most tense moments with your infectious laughter. You've been a great leader at Western, and we are deeply indebted for your contributions. Among the many honors and tributes that you have rightly earned over your 2 decanal terms, I must say the one that resonates the most with me is the one that Carol referred to, and that is the Mayor's Honor Award that was presented to you this past January. In recognition for your strong and consistent leadership on campus and in the community, as well as your fine work in enriching the arts in our city. Well done, my friend. Now, as mentioned, Betty Anne joined us 10 years ago from the University of Michigan. And Betty Anne, those of you who know her well, knows that she has a competitive side to her. She loves the University of Michigan, much like she loves Western University. So her first year, I will never forget, her University of Michigan football team was played my alma mater, the Ohio State University Buckeyes, and they beat them. So Betty Anne raced into the dean's meeting on the Tuesday morning, made a beeline to me to appropriately rub it in, and rub it in she did. She then proposed an annual Richie's breakfast bet with me. And for the record, Michigan has lost every game since. And for the last 9 years, I've enjoyed 9 breakfasts on Betty's behalf. So I should also recognize her generous spirit as well. A couple of years ago, I thought it might be good to intensify our rivalry a little bit. So I purchased a proud supporter of the Ohio State Buckeyes football program license plate holder. I scouted out where Betty Anne parked her car. I found out what time she normally leaves the office. So one evening, I scampered over from the health science building, screwdriver in hand, and secretly installed the license plate holder on her car. While installing the plate, it dawned on me that I had forgot to devise a strategy for dealing with campus police if they had arrived and asked me what I was doing to Dean Younker's car. Luckily, that did not happen. The plate was installed, and Betty Anne drove around the city for a good 4 months as a proud supporter of the Ohio State University. Now, knowing Betty Anne as we do, you know she would not let that rest. And to this day, I'm still picking up magnets and stickers that she's put around my house from the University of Michigan. Betty Anne, I'm proud to have worked closely with you over the past 10 years and have enjoyed it so much. I'm also very pleased that Western is honoring you this afternoon in the presence of your colleagues, family, and friends for a job exceptionally well done. I'm also very pleased to participate in the Betty Anne Younker Community Commons project that Sarah just talked about. This lasting gift, named in your honor, is so fitting because of how much you value people and engagement. Students, staff, faculty, alumni, members of our community will gather in this space for generations. And I'm so proud to know that your name adorns it. I'm also very pleased to advise you that a beautiful plaque will permanently adorn this facility. And I have the honor of unveiling it to you right now, and I'll read the inscription in a moment. Betty Anne, the Betty Anne Younker's Community Commons, named in recognition of Dr. Betty Anne Younker, the first female dean of the Don Wright Faculty of Music, 2011 to 2021. Many alumni, colleagues, friends, and family have donated to Western University to honor her leadership and impact on the music community. Betty Anne, this is a great a gift. This is a very fitting gift, and I'm so pleased that our university is honoring you this way. This is an honor that you richly deserve. Thank you for your leadership over the past 10 years. Thank you for your friendship. Congratulations to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you very much. And what a wonderful tribute, Betty Anne, and very well deserved. I'm now going to introduce 4 people who have all prepared videos and have tributes. They each asked to speak, they were asked to speak to Betty Anne's involvement in the community, arts community around town, overall community. So our video speakers will be Carol Stevenson, who's the former Dean of the Ivy Business School, John Nicholson of Nicholson Sheffield, Robert Collins of the LEDC, and former president of the Alumni Association Board of Directors, and Sylvia Davis from the Encore Concert Band and New Horizons Band. And we have the videos. And I remind people that you can put comments and congratulations or whatever things you might want to pass on to Betty Anne in the chat. They will be saved, and we will include them in the tribute book.
Hi, Betty Anne. Betty Anne and I were colleagues as deans many years ago, and we developed a great friendship. I am so thrilled, Betty Anne, about your retirement and best wishes. We actually bonded at a dean's meeting where there was a Myers-Briggs type exercise, and we found out we were the same personality types. And we also found out that we were the most unlikely people to become deans. So from there, we shared a lot of our ups and downs over breakfasts at Ritchie's. We both built new buildings, and Betty Anne was determined that she was going to have a wonderful new building for her faculty, staff, musicians, and of course the students. And so we shared some of the obstacles and how to get around them during that period of time. Betty Anne has always served her communities. She loved engaging with whether it was the London community, whether it was the alumni community, with her own faculty, staff, and students. She really felt that she served her communities. So I wish you all the best in your retirement. You've done a fabulous job. You've made a big difference. And I hope that we can share many more breakfasts at Ritchie's. Good luck, Betty Anne.
Hi, Betty Anne. Congratulations on your retirement and on having a space named after you in what I still think of as the new building. It's been a privilege to work with you over the past decade, and I've really enjoyed the time we've spent in renovating and adding to the Don Wright School of Music. All the best. You must be proud.
I first had the great privilege of meeting Betty Anne at a Western event when she was a brand new dean at the Don Wright Faculty of Music. As normal at those events, there were a few formal remarks from the then president and then some socializing. Betty Anne was one of those people who swiftly moved around the room to meet and greet those people that she hadn't met before through her official duties. Very quickly, we had a chance to chat about the music school and its ambitions, and she very clearly identified that Western Alumni Association was a community that she wanted to get to know better. So soon after that, she started to share her plans for the music faculty's physical redevelopment and the opportunity for Western alumni to contribute. Very pleased that the Legacy Committee of our association recognized that and made a significant contribution on behalf of the general alumni population to the faculty. Then, later on, she also noticed that we had a very significant Alumni Achievement Awards, and that this was a potential audience for the Don Wright Faculty of Music Hall of Fame recipients to get even greater recognition with the broader Western community. And she sees that opportunity, and now to this day, there are joint events, especially when there isn't COVID. So that gives you just an inkling of her being able to identify different communities of interest and to engage effectively. Similarly, I've been able to see her operations within the City of London, and just the way she's been able to connect with all of the different music interest groups and arts groups, her role of the president of the London Arts Council, and being very ably building those community connections. By the way, I used to hear regularly of those because we had living with us at that time a former Faculty of Music choral professor and Guelph Music Chamber maestro, Gerald Neufeld, who would tell me about the goings-on of the music faculty and the warmth, energy, and clear direction that Betty Anne has brought to that entity. So yes, again, the faculty is one of the many different jewels in the crown of Weston's many accomplishments. And Betty Anne, I wish you and Dale all the happiness, and we hope that we can stay connected in the times and years ahead. Best wishes with your next music adventures, wherever they may be.
Hello, I'm Sylvia Davis. I'm honored to speak about the amazing Betty Anne Younker. While Dean, Betty Anne has been a champion for not-for-profit musicians and music groups, people in instrumental and choral groups who don't perform for a living, but just for the joy of making music together and sharing it with listeners. To give only 2 examples of her contributions, she has encouraged hundreds of adults to start or resume playing band instruments through the New Horizons program at Western University, a program she co-founded over 20 years ago. Every New Horizons participant, me included, has benefited from her heartfelt and enthusiastic support. She has promoted the valuable role of community music groups. She hasn't just talked about how important they are, she has shown her commitment by joining one. Encore, a community concert band in London, is proud to have Betty Anne as a member. She has contributed to the band not only with her considerable playing chops, but with her organizational and leadership skills. Betty Anne, you have the admiration, respect, and affection of all of us in the not-for-profit music community. We have treasured your positive spirit, energy, and wonderful sense of humor, and are so grateful for the many ways you have supported what we do. Thank you, congratulations, and don't be a stranger. There will always be a chair in the flute section or a VIP seat in the audience for you.
Hi everyone, I'm Clark Bryan, Western Faculty of Music grad, 1992. Betty Anne, we're going to miss you as Dean of Music. In the past 10 years since I met you, I have watched you work so hard to build relationships with community. It's been a joy to see you foster both music education and music performance in our community. And most notably in recent years, wonderful to collaborate with you in your support of the El Sistema program with student teachers and helping me to teach a leadership class. We know that you're finishing this role, but also that you'll be right around the corner, and we're looking forward to your continued work to provide the gift of music and the gift of community. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you to everybody who participated in making those videos. As has already been mentioned by Carol, Betty Anne was named on the Mayor's New Year's honor list for her contribution to the arts in January of this year. And I have a letter here, Betty Anne, from the Mayor. Dear Betty Anne, on behalf of the London City Council, it is my honor to congratulate you on your distinguished career with Western University. Thank you for your outstanding leadership and dedication in your role as Dean of the Don Wright Faculty of Music. A 10-year tenure as Dean speaks not only to your character and dedication, but also to the caliber of Western University as an employer and community partner. Your achievement in receiving the Dr. Pedro Goldman Award from the Faculty of Music Students' Council and in 2008 being deemed Alumnus of the Year by Pennsylvania State University College of Arts and Architecture speaks to your heart and your commitment and is what makes you a standout in our community. You have inspired many of your colleagues, and your legacy of excellence will be passed on to the next Dean of the Don Wright Faculty of Music for Western University. Let me extend my sincere best wishes to you as you embark on new adventures. Please do share your new contact details with me when you can, Betty Anne. I would be delighted to stay in touch and hope to continue to cross paths again in the future. Kind regards, Ed Holder. It's now my opportunity to turn the microphone over, if you will, to Betty Anne herself. Betty Anne.
Thank you, Sarah, for that introduction. Well, I'm humbled by such recognition as reflected in the remarks and videos. And thank you to each of you for your words, pictures, and of course, the music, the contributions, the namespace, and by the presence of everyone today. Someone mentioned to me a year ago, and I think it was Jim Weiss, and no, Jim, I did not drive around for 4 months with that bloody thing on the, it was for about 3 days, just to make the record straight. And anyhow, someone mentioned me a year ago that for the last few months of being dean, there will be spaces opened up to reflect and ponder. Well, COVID-19 decided otherwise, as we all know. So there really hasn't been much time to really reflect on the last 10 years. However, as I went through the files and while packing up the office, time was found and thoughts began to emerge. And just as a sidebar, the organizers of this event have been extremely emphatic about who makes what decisions. A tad uncomfortable for me, as I have been characterized as a slightly type A type, but upon realizing that many decisions were made before even the conversations began with me, I just smiled and thought, onward. So I coined some thoughts with the directive that I would within a certain time limit. And so here they are. When I think back on the values and work of the faculty over the last 10 years, the first thought is the continuing felt sense and acknowledging of community as valued and practiced. This has been a constant theme as articulated by alumni, current students, and staff and faculty members. The second is how as a faculty, we embraced opportunities, some with initial hesitancy, but as the opportunity unfolded and the direction was forward, the collective energy was palatable. The retreats, strategic planning exercises, revamping of staff roles, hiring of faculty and staff members, program reviews, curricular changes, beginning to work towards a greater diversity across programs, and interdisciplinary, international recruiting and program initiatives. Oh, and the floods in the old music building and TC 101. And of course, the reconstruction of part of the old music building intertwined with the new construction. I've learned much about your ability to be resilient and imaginative. So what will I do next? I've been asked. After 40 years in the profession, 9 years of public school music teaching, 31 years at universities as a doctoral student and faculty member, with 17 of those being an administrator, I can honestly say that if I were to start all over again, I would make the same decisions. I am most fortunate to have carved out a career in something I'm fiercely passionate about, music and educating students through music. And I'm fortunate to have had parents who believed in following one's passion, as long as I could support myself financially. But mom and dad have passed on, and I'm reminded every day of their unconditional love and support. I now look forward to a year of academic leave starting August 1st. I have never experienced a sabbatical or leave, so I'm curious about this next adventure. I have several research projects to delve into, plus commitments to professional organizations and to return to the Encore, the concert band. I will return as a faculty member a year from now for 1 year in the music education department to conclude my career as I started, that is, as a faculty member. It's been a romantic notion of mine that I've kept in my head for the last 17 years. So in conclusion, I want to reach out to each of you, family and friends here and elsewhere. Thank you to the donors whose support for the faculty in many ways continues, including this community space. As stated at the beginning of these remarks, I am humbled by the recognition. I also thank those whose idea was to have a namespace. The abundance of natural light in this space, as created by John Nicholson, the architect, is most welcoming as communities will gather at intermission and for receptions. To members of the Dean's Advisory Committee, your ability to navigate inroads for me throughout London and provide insights has been most valuable, so thank you. To the New Horizons Band and Encore, the concert band communities, and you actually let me play with you, your passion continues to affirm the necessity of making music. Your energy is infectious and most welcomed. To the alums who have gotten to know over the last 10 years, an amazing group of people who are doing interesting and innovative work across professions, including music teaching and learning. You are some of our strongest recruiters. To my colleagues in the faculty, students, staff, and faculty members, thank you for your patience in space to let chaos occur. What I would define as organized chaos, others may not. I have learned much about your passion and commitment as we moved through the various opportunities and challenges as previously noted. And to those who are responsible for the work that allowed this event to happen, thank you once again for your attention to detail that reflects your ongoing dedication to the faculty. To my decanal colleagues, the Dream Dean's team, your words and lyrics and singing voices are etched in my memory, and I have the video. To the AVPs and VPs and associated staff with whom I've worked, thank you for your insights, guidance, and patience. To Sarah Prichard, Acting Provost, and Alan Shepard, President, thank you. I am very excited for the direction of the university as we move forward. I look forward to the continuing conversations with each of you over food and favorite liquids in the various gathering spaces here in London. And last but not least, to my husband, Dale Ender, who has never asked why, well, maybe once, as we moved from province to province and province to states and back again. We married before I began the PhD, thus have lived in multiple apartments and houses as a duo and as a soloist, thus resulting in living apart for extended periods of time. And much of that was before FaceTime and email, texting, and Zoom. Thank you for being a partner through all things necessary for a career to expand and embrace the opportunities that I followed and we supported. So there are reasons for leadership positions to be turnstiles, as it allows us to move through and onward while opening spaces for others to continue the work, in this case of the faculty, in new and progressive ways. I'm excited for the faculty as the next musical acts unfold, with Michael Kim as the next dean. We welcome him as dean and Kyung Kim as a faculty member in the piano area, and their son, William, who will join the percussion studio as a second-year undergraduate student. I am humbled and I thank you, and I'm going to reach for a tissue because it has been an extreme pleasure to serve as dean. I look forward to the continuing interactions with all of you in the community of London. It is a rich place in which to live and to be able to make music and to thrive and survive. So thank you for that again.
Thank you, Betty Ann, for those words. I have to say, this whole tribute this afternoon has just been such a pleasure. And it really speaks to how awesome you've been as a leader and dean for the Faculty of Music. I want to thank everybody who joined us this afternoon. Of course, we wish we could have done this in person. We are in our Zoom world, but we appreciate you being there, and at least we can see your faces. And I know that you will all make it a good excuse to catch up with Betty Anne when she comes back in the fall and beyond. So thank you for being present this afternoon. And before we totally conclude, I'd ask everybody to unmute your microphones and say thank you to Betty Anne before we go.
Thank you, Betty
Thanks,
Ann.
Betty Ann.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Betty Ann.
Thank you.